Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order. Our first item is the land acknowledgement. I understand Dr. Cottle will be doing it this morning.
Oh, yeah, I will do it this afternoon. This is in honor of late knowledge keeper Buddy Wesley. Abawatek, Doha Daouch Hu Chimagina, Pinamash Yahin, Pinamash Chuap Chim Chian Kudibi, Pinamash Ta, Pinamash Cha, Pinamash Baha, Pinamash Ojija, Pinamash Mini, Pinamash Hora, Pinamash Wapta, Pinamash Iahe, Ake Hukimagachach, Wazin Ishinabi.
Thank you, Dr. Cottle. Now turning to the agenda of June 20th, 2022, Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I move that we approve the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Our first item of the day is the EPCOR Water Utility Technology Update, and Mr. Como is going to give the introduction for us over there, if you would.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham. So since we started our new contract with EPCOR, there was a number of deliverables and measures that we have in the contract that were much more robust than what we had in the previous contract. And with the new, our new water resource engineer, who I'd like to introduce, Owen Tate, we have a presentation today to talk through a lot of the changes that we put in place and a dashboard that's been created using existing software and using the expertise from both the town of Canmore and EPCOR Water Services to develop this system that will identify a lot of the assets that we have and how they're maintained. And I don't want to say too much more because it's some really cool stuff that I hope Council will see, that ensuring that the assets are being maintained to a high level, and the level of responsibilities for each party in this new agreement and the portions of it. So with that, I will hand it over to Owen Tate, who I don't believe has been in front of council before, so this is his first presentation. And to support him, we have Arthur Ishkoff from EPCOR Water Services, who you've met before.
Good morning, Mr. Tate. I understand it's your first time as well. Well, mine too, so we're going to run and gun this thing. Welcome.
Oh. All right, well, yeah, good afternoon, Deputy Mayor and councillors. Yeah, my name is Owen Tate, the new water resource engineer with the town, under the Public Works Group. So yeah, as Mr. Como mentioned, I'm here today to talk about, sorry, if we could switch the monitor to the HDMI. Thank you. Oh, there we go. I'm here to talk about the digital transformation projects that the utilities group has been undertaking relating to the utilities contract, along with working with EPCOR. So the goal of these was working. Now it's not working?
No worries, take your time.
I might try it one more time. Some interactive.
Okay. Continue, Mr. Tate. Presenter.
Yes. Perfect. All right, so yeah, as mentioned, we're here to talk about the digital transformation update. So the goal of this presentation is to run through how we're using technology leveraged within the town's existing software programs to be more efficient with the resources we have, the taxpayer dollars, and to ensure the utilities infrastructure is being managed and maintained effectively. So a couple of the contents we'll get into today are the utilities operations maintenance and management agreement. So that's the contract with EPCOR. Specifically, we'll talk about the new KPI dashboard. And then on the GIS data entry side, we'll talk about the annual inspection forms and the ERT meter upgrades. So if there's any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to invite you to ask them throughout.
Thank you very much.
Wait till the end. Okay, so starting with the utilities operations maintenance management agreement. So this was, as Mr. Como mentioned, the new contract with EPCOR in the town that started back in September 2021. And within that contract, there's these new key performance indicators. There's 33 of them that have been developed to make sure that the contract is a little bit more robust than it was previously. So what we've done is, of these 33 KPI targets, we've prioritized the top 20 to digitize first, and then the remaining 12 are going to be rolled out throughout this year as well. So these KPIs all have to do with utilities in the form of public health and compliance measurements, operational efficiencies, and asset and infrastructure health. So looking at the first new KPI dashboard, so this is a Power BI report that we've generated. So again, this is part of the town software program that rolled out with the Microsoft 365. So the goal of this is to eliminate the manually intensive report generation, data gathering. And so all of that information gets pulled directly into the report, and then we get to spend time reviewing the report and analyzing the data from the information that's been gathered for us. So that also helps us with year-over-year trending. We don't have to go back over previous reports. It's all laid out directly for us. Another couple improvements. Core water service live, so we're not waiting for any sort of delays. And then also, if you, well, it's a little bit smaller, but we've categorized the KPI report into a scoreboard where each KPI metric, it gives a color in terms of red, yellow, or green. So green is when we're hitting the target, everything looks good, so we can continue on as planned. If it's yellow, it means we're sort of within 10% variance, either plus or minus of the target, so it's something to keep an eye on. And then red means it's something, a measure that we have to dig into further. So we can really focus our time more effectively than going through all the KPIs. This one might be. Okay, so the next one we'll go into is the GIS data entry. So again, within the contract with EPCOR, there are annual inspections on the utility assets throughout the town that are required. These assets already exist within GIS. The town has roughly about 29,000 assets included in it already, so it's a great resource that we can utilize. So what the data entry allows us to do is convert from paper inspection forms to operators performing inspections right on their cell phone, and that information immediately gets uploaded into our dashboards. So it's real time, we're not having to wait or transfer any of the information and potentially lose any of that data. So that really helps us. There's a little short video here. So this is just a little example of using their cell phone, they can select an asset, so a catch basin or dry well. Right on the phone, they can enter all the information. It's all pre-selected questions with answers, simple drop-downs that they can use. So this really helps us with tracking the inspections, analyzing troubled areas, and improving the repair program. So everything is categorized nicely, and we can be repetitive with them over time. The other nice thing with these forms too is as soon as the operator uploads the form and saves it, it stays with that asset forever. So over time, if we're looking to do repair programs, we can always look back on that information and see how the assets were performing. So once the operator fills out those forms, we have to figure out a way to visualize it. Instead of looking at Excel spreadsheets, we've built some dashboards. Now this is the same, it's within ArcGIS, which the town has access to. It's called the story map. I believe the CAMBA housing monitoring report is also utilized with this program. So it's a dashboard where you can come in. For examples, we can look at catch basins for the entire town. It gives us a quick KPI report to see how many we've inspected to date, how many need to be cleaned, and then how many have been cleaned. So we're able to properly plan our repair programs or cleaning programs effectively. And then also on the right side, there's a little interactive map that shows where the assets are within the town, where we've inspected or not. And then you can zoom in to find out which ones need to be cleaned, so we can determine if there's hotspot areas that we have to focus on, a little bit more troubled areas year over year, so we can really focus our time effectively. So lastly, we'll talk about the ERT meter upgrades. So around town, EPCOR and the town have kicked off a life cycle project to upgrade the water meters for commercial and residential. Some of you might have gotten a letter in the mail saying your water meter needs to be upgraded from the old meter to the new one. So again, we're using this same platform with the GS mobile app for the operators to complete the replacement program, and then the dashboards to track our progress in town and make sure that we're trying to kind of tackle areas strategically to replace all the meters and save the valley bottom first before we go to the next area, because we've got a certain number of meters in stock to replace with, and so we're trying to use those efficiently versus going around town randomly. The other thing that's been great with this program is we've utilized the Microsoft 365 bookings app. So the public can book their appointment right on the app. So within the letter, they got a link to this bookings page. So they're able to come in here and populate or pick a time and date that works for them best. So it really streamlines the communication between the homeowner, EPCOR, and the town for managing and scheduling these meter replacements. Oh, sorry, that's not showing up. There it is. There we go. So yeah, this is the interactive booking page. So a lot of these software programs, again, they already exist within the town's software suite, so we haven't had to acquire any new software. We're just leveraging what technology that we've already got and just taking it to the next step. The other thing with these programs we've been doing is we've had a lot of great work with EPCOR Water Services, with their assistance with the program. We've also had internal departments assisting us too. The GS department has been instrumental in building the GIS forms. The utilities finance team has helped us with the ERT meters along with IT and again, EPCOR. So yes. I don't know if there's any questions, but.
Any questions for Mr. Tate? No. As someone with a computer science background, I really appreciate how far this technology has come. To be able to map that out and see the life cycle and see real-time data is really impressive. So,
Definitely.
thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, one question from Councillor Faubert.
To look at the screen for the question. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham. I actually remember when water meters were first installed in Canmore back in the day. So, and that was a pretty big deal. My question is, like, what's next? Like, I love all of this stuff. Is there more transformation? Like, is there more ways that we can make the job easier, incorporate technology, understand how it functions, water leaks?
Definitely. So with the new meters that we're installing, these ERT meters, they're an encoder, receiver, transmitter. So the previous meter, an operator would have to go and sort of tag each house to pull the information. It's pretty much just a water meter reading. These new ERT meters have a radio signal that can be picked up remotely. Either some communities will drive a vehicle through the community and it'll just pull the info, or you can use planes to just pull wide areas. So we will reduce the manpower and time taken to collect all that meter information. These meters also have the ability to have leak detection systems. They take more readings on an hourly basis versus the meters we have now, which are just sort of instantaneous points in time. So by collecting all that information, we'll have a lot more data. With that data, we can utilize these programs, Power BI, GIS, to analyze the data to help us more. Because otherwise it'll be a lot of data to have to mine through. So these programs should help us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Thank you, Mr. Tate. Have yourself a great day. Sure. Next up, we have an update from Mr. Como and the EPCOR regarding the recent water restrictions.
Yep, it's on the screen. Yes, good afternoon. I just wanted to water services here. We have the current site manager, Arthur Ishkaloff, as well as Dennis Laterno, who was a previous site manager, but fortunately was also able to be the one stepping in for Mr. Ishkaloff while he was away last week or the week before when all of this happened. So we have both gentlemen here to provide council and the public an update as to the circumstances and the conditions around the water restriction issue we had a few weeks ago, and how it started, how it played out, and why we were able to ultimately remove the water restriction ban. So with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Ishkaloff.
Deputy Mayor Graham, councillors, good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to present.
Welcome.
Just briefly going through presentation here. In case if there is any technical questions, please feel free to interrupt if you have to. But with that, I wanted to go straight to the summary to evaluate and explain the water restrictions and took place a couple of weeks ago. It was a balancing issue in the pressure. We need you to speak in the mic. Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
it was a balancing issue in regulating the pressure zones between pump house 1 and pump house 2. We call them water treatment plants as well. This issue was not related to excessive demand or shortage of water or snow melting in the mountains and so on. It's, the system has enough water and can produce enough water for all anticipated demand. So with that, I just wanted to show the complex Canmore infrastructure. I'm sorry. So infrastructure is pretty complex in Canmore. Actually, in our operations, that's probably the most complex in the whole globe operations we see, with a lot of elevation changes, a lot of elements. As Mr. Tato mentioned, there is over 20,000 asset items as well we have to maintain and clarify. But basically, with this particular one, to visualize the pump house 2 and 1 and the grassy reservoir, which everybody was talking about, and clarify the difference. So the star on the left, I don't have a pointer, but basically the star on the left corresponds to the pump house 2, as well as the Roundel 4 Bay Reservoir. The grassy reservoir, which had a shortage, is actually down to the map on the bottom. And that's a concrete box. It's a structure under the ground. That's how we present it as a reservoir. We call it as a reservoir. And the star to the right is pump house 1. And the arrow in the middle is so-called crosstown feeder, which we use to control infrastructure. I will explain it a little bit more down the road. So apart from pressure control issues, we also found and fixed 4 substantial water main breaks, which correspond to the leak detection program I was talking about on May 16th, as well as we were able to conserve non-revenue water demand equal to estimation, again, as per our calculations based on their circumstances of the repair, from 11 to 19 liters per second, or 950 to 1,600 roughly cubic meters per day, which corresponds to some percentage of initial shortfall we had on June 6, which was roughly 16 liters per second from pump house 2. The challenges we also observed was the water flow measurements are not easily available in current infrastructure, so there is no flow meter, so-called flow meters exist in the crosstown feeder I was pointing prior. And that's pretty much corresponded to additional steps to be taken to actually understand the technical problem and evaluate why there is a disbalance in the system. And we also suspect, as we speak, there is an investigation ongoing. Obviously, it's too early to say about the facts, but we suspect that pressure-reducing valves, there is many of them, to be exact, it's roughly 46 to 50 in town, and they are inside the walls, which require confined space entry, at least 3 people. So we suspect that one of the pressure-reducing valves may play a role in initial misbalance situation. As we speak today, we have specialists working on it under the bridges, evaluating the data. We also, my presentation says, source the flow meters. We actually have them installed. One is already installed 15 minutes ago. I just read the update, so we're on the right path. We start reading the infrastructure. We, hopefully will understand how the system will distribute the flow going forward after the adjustments we took. Yes, and with your permission, I would like to go with a sequence of events roughly, so it will give us an idea day by day what we faced, what kind of technical issues we faced, and what we observed in infrastructure, as well as the short-term mitigation steps we took to contain the situation.
Please, I think that'd be very appreciated.
Yes, thank you. And so after the weekend of June 5th to 6th, after the weekend of June 4th, actually, on June 5th, we start seeing that grassy reservoir is not recovering the volumes during the night. So the initial observation was there is a pretty heavy drawdown from the reservoirs. And logically, for us, when we see something like this, we suspect either mysterious user at night or some sort of leaks. So we start collecting technical data and review operational parameters to actually start determining the cause, what is causing the reservoir not to fill up properly during the night, because we fill it up at night and we feed the system during the day. That's pretty much how it works. And at that stage, for us to understand, we engaged engineering consultant, CIMA Plus, probably a familiar name. They are helping us with the flow dynamics model. So they have information about the infrastructure of town, and they can calculate the predicted flows. So on June 7th, reservoir, Grassy Reservoir, not the Randall Ford Bay reservoir, was able to fill up a slight volume, but we still see the persistent drawdown from the system. And at that stage, we're obviously, trying to mitigate and see. So if there is a leaks, if there is a dynamics issue, and so on. So CIMA Plus was asked to see how we can balance at this point of time and see if we can engage Pump House 1 to produce more water for the system to try and balance the Pump House 2. On June 8th, again, there is some success in refilling, but not to the level we would like to see that. And also, we had a successful repair of the leaks, estimation for everywhere from 3 to 5 liters per second, which corresponds to 260 cubic meters per day, which is substantial. As well as CIMA Plus produces 3 scenarios for us how to increase potential production from Pump House 1 to help Pump House 2 to recover the volumes overnight. And flow dynamic at that time indicates that there is obviously additional precautions to be taken. So just to stop here briefly, we start to mitigate the first logical answer to the questions. We start looking at the leaks, see if there is subsidence or snow melt and the ground is actually start affecting the water mains, and we start getting the leaks. At the same time, simultaneously, we're looking at the infrastructure issue and the balancing issue. So on June 9th, we require water restriction, obviously, to continue fill up the reservoir. So the combination of factors here is June 9th is Friday. We need to make sure we have enough water for the fire department and the public from the main contributor of the production, which is Pump House 2, going into the weekend. As well as CIMA Plus scenarios, which were short-term, which is manipulating some infrastructure as well as switching the balance between pump houses, working but not long-term solution. So we see the results, we see the reservoir started to fill up, but there is also some engineering concerns in terms of having the infrastructure manipulated the way it is. So as well as we found another leak, it was also water main break. And we completed that with estimation recovery of 3 liters per second. And actually on that particular day, we had the 3rd excavation, but because of the high groundwater levels right now in town, we had a lot of challenges pumping the water out, so we had to continue and leave this leak to the better days when the basin water levels actually going down. Okay, so with water restrictions implemented on June 10th and 11th weekend, we were able to successfully fill up reservoir to the top of its capacity. And also, thanks for restrictions, we were able to have uninterrupted flow. System was not disrupted with demand of irrigation. Systems was not disrupted with any activities related with the hot weather during that particular weekend. So we were able to get all necessary data to analyze the changes as well as the current situation which took place the week ago. So we were basically had to have some sort of hard stop to get all the engineering data done in order to understand the problem, initial problem, and work on the mitigation going forward in the next week 2. All right, so on June 12th, obviously, with the changes we implemented and the leaks being fixed, the Grassy Reservoir levels were stable. We also dispatched additional leak detection specialists to expedite potential findings because the initial contribution of the leaks was substantial for the situation, and obviously by fixing the leaks, we could also assist the reduction of the demand. As well as we had to clarify the essential water use, so it was additional communication was done, and we had to clarify because of some questions were about the Grassy Reservoir and Randall Ford Bay, so we had to issue additional explanation, who is affected, who is not affected, who is exempt, and so on, and clarify that there is nothing to do with, the water sources. It's not nothing related with supply. It's a demand issue. Okay, and so at that time we had good understanding that yes, misbalance issue plays also substantial role. At this point of time, we could have say roughly 50–60% of the demand issue going into the pump house 2 was caused by misbalance, and another one potentially with the leaks. So, and with that, on June 13th, to confirm our theories, we had to go and do the infrastructure manipulation to understand if our theories and engineering calculations are correct. So we started to manipulate the infrastructure on the crosstown feeder and work on those pressure relieving or pressure reducing and regulating valves to understand which one is actually may have potentially caused additional flow, extra flow going in one direction while it's not going to another direction. Because situation was pump house 2 was primarily feeding all the downtown, all the main demand sources, while pump house 1 was working like 30% of its capacity. They're supposed to work roughly 60–40% ratio. That's a healthy ratio. Okay, that was our goal to achieve this parameter. Okay, and the fourth leak was fixed, and on this particular day, which also contribute. At that time, we had good understanding how we can manipulate the infrastructure, what can be done to go ahead and lift all the restrictions. And we did. On June 14th, all water restrictions were lifted. And right now, we're continuing with investigation and further monitoring. So next steps, as I mentioned, we will and we want to monitor the flow going forward. We want to see how the system distributes the demand from pump house 1 to the town, from pump house 2 to the town, what is actually working, in which way, and how much flow is being directed. It will be 3 flow meters. 1 is installed, as I mentioned, and 2 more on its way, hopefully in the next couple of days. Continue with leak repairs. If we find any, we will try to repair them. Obviously, historically in Canmore, EPCOR repairs the leaks in fall when the ground level is going down. Right now, it's a huge challenge for us to pump the water out, and you probably see some construction sites actually struggling with the same issues like we are. And we also committed to repair. If we find any regulating valves which are not adjusted properly or have mechanical issue, we will repair them accordingly. Also, we will work with the Parks irrigation team as well as Mr. Kamo's department to introduce staggered irrigation program, because what we also noticed, the irrigation of the parks is on every other day pattern, and it gives us additional demand on particular time, and it's at night as well when we fill up our reservoirs. So if we stagger the parks, that will equalize the demand. Instead of having this on the demand chart, we will have a stable line which will more healthier parameters for infrastructure as well. So as well as the last but not the least, it's probably big and something which was not yet utilized, is combined efforts to introduce water demand management plan for town of Canmore. In our experience, our peer municipalities do have water demand for situations like massive water breaks, heat waves, infrastructure issues, and so on, and which will also help and streamline the communication pattern, where it will be certain scenarios and certain steps to be taken, who is affected, and it will be ideally to have tiers of public businesses full shutdown and so on. So that's the recommendation going forward, as well as combination of factors which can be mitigated by having this demand plan as easily available. So with that, on behalf of myself, EPCOR, and everyone involved, I would like to thank everyone and residents of Canmore for great support. We are very grateful, and we understand that it was challenges and water restrictions were tough, but it was also critical for us to understand the parameters, to analyze the data, and we needed these stagnant conditions to understand, mitigate, proceed further, fix, and go on. So thank you very much for your support and understanding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ishkloff. I'll open the floor to any questions from council.
And then when I'm done, you clear it, and then the next person can come up. There we go. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions, and the crosstown feeder, and what is that? Is that the pipe that was installed under the river that led to the boil water advisory a couple years ago?
No, thank you, Councillor Faber. So this is not the same
that
thing.
one?
This is the pipeline,
Okay.
which is pretty much going back to the map. It's a part of existing infrastructure. It's roughly 1966 built.
Okay.
And it's used right now, and it was used by us to actually switch the demand from pump house 2 to pump house 1 by isolating it. So it's a connection, if you would, between the town, which is on the bridge. So it connects left and right side of the town
So
on the map.
It's on the railway bridge.
it's okay. And so like this thing, this is about that balancing. So this pipe between those two pump houses, that the system operates with each providing a certain percentage of the overall.
It's a connection. The balance is being regulated by the pressure regulating valves which are installed there, and there is obviously many of them. This particular piece of pipe there is 4 of them, and total is 47 in town. And basically what they do is they compensate the additional pressures or extra pressures, let's say, going downhill, and to prevent the hydraulic hammer and make sure that some areas of the town have less pressure or more pressure. They regulate the pressure to make it somewhat equal and distribute further down the line. So we will be looking right now on one particular, and it will be 4 in total on this particular stretch where we want to analyze and see if there is any correspondence with the current situation.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it correctly, there are a number of things that contributed to this.
Absolutely.
Any one of those individually wouldn't have caused this?
No, this is, as I mentioned, the system is very complex. It took us a lot of effort, engineering calculations, data collected. It's multiple megabytes of data from different sources, from the flow meters, from the pressure regulating valves, from the computerized system to actually understand. And there is a combination of unusual demand we saw. After the weekend, it was fairly hot on this particular week. So the excessive demand went towards the pump house too. Now, back in last year, roughly in October, we started to see that. Right now, we see the trend that the demand from healthy ratio to 60 to 40 started to be going towards 65, 35, 70, 30, and so on, until it get to the situation which we saw on the weekend of June 4th. Leaks would contribute. Obviously, it's a substantial amount of volume, but it's about 40 to 50% of the total situation. So by just fixing the leak, this situation would not be contained.
And then what was the worst case scenario in this situation? Like if we didn't do anything, would parts of
Absolutely.
the town just run out of water?
So this particular situation is pump house 2, and the grassy reservoir would just go below the fire flow levels, and will just go below, the levels which are healthy for the town, and we have to compensate with pump house 1, which is obviously will not going to give enough production, so it will be shortages, obviously.
Thank you. I have more, but I'll wait.
So that's another thing why we had to have a hard stop and move quickly.
I can clarify a little
Yeah.
bit there.
Mr.
Councillor
Letourneau, welcome back. I didn't expect to see you so soon.
I know. It's great to be back. Just to clarify that both pump houses combined had adequate capacity to supply the town. It was just that because of the shift in imbalance, Pump House 2 was taking the lion's share of the demand, whereas Pump House 1 had latent capacity not tapped into. So in your scenario that you're asking for, we would have called upon Pump House 2, even through manual intervention, to ramp up and meet demand. So there was no Armageddon scenario that would have occurred. We just would have had to do considerable manual intervention to ensure that we had tapped into the capacity of both pump houses to meet the total demand.
This all helps me better understand a complex system.
It is a complex system.
Sometimes you need it, when it fails, you truly understand how complex it is.
Yes, which is why we called in SEMA Plus almost immediately when we realized that the modeling was going to be critical in resolving and pinpointing this situation, and also coming up with the scenarios that Arthur referred to help us come out. We had 3 different scenarios we could call upon to help get that Pump House 1 production ramped up. So we were in pretty good shape.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else? I've got a couple, if I might. So we said there was 4 breaks in the system?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that abnormal for this time of year? I can't remember us getting that many substantial leaks in the system.
Yeah, thank you for a question, Deputy Mayor Graham. As we talked about it briefly last time, so we are implementing the enhanced system to leak detection, as well as we were ramping up to finding more leaks. So we had 2 specialists. We have enhanced leak detection, and that's actually helped us to understand that there is much more than it normally is. So I guess it's a combination of various approaches with the new technology, ramp up on personnel, as well as we still have several existing ones, but we just prioritize. So there is some leaks on the irrigation system. There is some leaks on the hydrants and so on. We just prioritize the major ones, which are on the water main. Till that event, we were able to find 2. And because of the higher groundwater levels, we were not planning to touch them because, as we mentioned, they were not major contributors in the main issue. And normally, we do find them during the year. We just plan the repair accordingly, not in emergency situation, but when the cost is less and conditions are more preferable to go and work on them safely. Right. Now, in terms of the amount of leaks historically, I don't have any information. Mr. Dennis, if you remember how it was in the past?
Absolutely, yes. For the 7 years that I was, are we okay?
Continue, please.
Yeah, okay. I'm sensitive of the time. So of the 7 years that I was a site manager, we historically would have anywhere from 2 to 5 main breaks occur as the ground was shifting underneath, because as you know, there's water rivulets throughout. And the leak detection program that was in place used state-of-the-art equipment that the town purchased several years ago, and it did actually locate and pinpoint leaks, so we felt that it was working. But as we struggled to find these additional sources of water loss, as Mr. Ishkaloff noted at the annual presentation, the decision was made actually prior to this event to bring in a different enhanced leak detection technology. And that actually began in mid-May before this event occurred. And those 4 leaks that Arthur referred to were located before this event occurred earlier in May. And so we were finding that this new technology was locating leaks where the old technology had not.
Right.
So that's why all of a sudden you find that we have 4 leaks. It's coincidental to a certain extent that these leaks were located just a few weeks before this event happened. And the intent was to repair them when the groundwater was lower, the cost is less, and you have a higher chance of success, and the safety factors involved with excavating in soggy soil is mitigated.
Thank you. If I recall in your guys' last report, it was something like, was it 20% leakage from the system?
I think it's around 20, 25, 27, 28.
25?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it tends to historically been in that level.
Yeah. And after these repairs, are we any better for that?
Well, we're always hopeful that it's going to reduce. Now, historically, we have repaired 2 to 5 leaks, and we find that there are slight drops, but we tend to have always been at that level. That's why we, historically, with the last council, we started to shift our focus towards service lines. We felt that the leaks were on the service lines, and we actually went out and acoustically listened to over 1,000 service lines and did not find any leaks. So we were concerned that we were still concerned about where this water was going, and so we then shifted our focus to some commercial services. We did find a couple undeveloped lots in Three Sisters that had service lines that had been left open, and when they powered the system with water, those were running, you know, free and clear, and probably losing 100,000 cubic meters a year through those. So then we had hopes that, okay, let's see if we can find service lines that have leaks like that. And there was one right in the corner of Rusticana that was stumbled upon when they were excavating, and found that it was an abandoned service. It had been abandoned long before anybody remembered, and it was generating leaks. So that's where our focus was. But when we didn't find any more success in that area, we then shifted to a different technology to then redetect on the mains, and that's where we started finding leaks where the previous technology had not.
Excellent, thank you. I've got somebody in the queue. Dr. Cottle, are you looking to speak? No. Andreas?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to add that, just further to that question, that as highlighted in the presentation from CEMA Plus on the UMP update, is we have a lot of pipes, water pipes in the downtown core that are built, constructed, and installed in the mid-60s that will be up for replacement from a life cycle perspective over the next 10 to 15 years. So what I think will be happening is we'll be addressing these bigger leaks, but other ones will develop because these pipes continue to age and deteriorate. So over the next 10 or 15 years, there'll be quite a challenge for the utility to ensure that we stay on top of these breaks. The other thing I would say, it's also difficult to find these leaks because of the type of soils we have, because they're so granular. When they do occur, they don't surface, they just go into the groundwater and dissipate. So it's tricky for us visually to be able to notice them from above ground, which would be how most other municipalities can find them typically.
Right.
We just don't have that luxury here.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
I have one more, but you go ahead. And then I think the public did a great job of responding, but I also thought there was some confusion around messaging and communications, and wondering what we learned from this incident in regards to that.
Yes, so obviously, as I mentioned, we also realized through our observations and the amount of clarification questions we had in the office here that there is potential confusion going on with understanding what's actually happening, and even the terms we use normally in our operations, like reservoir, was potentially misunderstood, and everybody thought that maybe it's a reservoir, it's around the 4 Bay, and we have a low snow melt, and there is an issue with supply. So on 12th, we had to go back and reevaluate the communication pattern and get together and to issue out the essential clarifications which we felt that it was required to clarify who is affected, who is not, what we can do, what we cannot do, and so Obviously, on the weekend, because I think initial communication and the water restrictions were taking place on Friday night, just before the weekend. And I think that also played a role that over the weekend we were just collecting the data and initial communication was done. And maybe if there is a clarifications required, we were just not getting those calls. But in the longer term solution, in our opinion, if we would have the water management plan and water demand plan, we would probably outline most of the most realistic scenarios in those plans, and it will be just clear who is affected, what scenarios are implemented, and when they will take place. And
Mr. Como, did you have something to add to that?
No, I was just, sorry, just in case Mr. Skloff didn't mention, but I think the water demand management plan will be a really valuable tool going forward based on the number of scenarios that we think may be in front of us on how we respond and the communication. I think I'll also add that we're very fortunate we've not had to put in a water restriction before. So it was the first time. We've learned lots. We saw where people were going and where people thought were the root causes, and so certainly learnings for me is being heading those off in the initial communications going forward.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And I think personally from a council perspective, the more we understand this complex system, the better we can support you as well.
appreciate it.
Councillor Forber, did you have one more still?
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to, through the chair, to the CAO, acknowledge this may be a question that's better answered in camera, but my question is around the cost of what occurred and whether or not this is something that's included in the contract, or because this was an emergency situation, is this something that would then be coming back to us for a budget approval? And I don't know if this is an in or out of camera question.
I can say right now is we don't know for sure. I think we need some more investigation, and once the dust settles, then that'll be a conversation that would determine next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Camon. Thank you. Councillor Faber.
Anything else from council? Okay. Oh, one from the CAO.
Sorry, no, we switched chairs, so we're throwing your... I'll just use this one, it's okay. But to your question, Councillor Faubert, when that dust settles and we have more info, we can report back to council on where that ended up. Yeah, so more to come.
Okay. Thank you all for the presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's good to see you back, and thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Next up for approval is the minutes of May 16th, I think. I'm pretty sure. May 16th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? I move that we approve the minutes of May 16th, 2023 Committee of the Whole. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Do we have CAMBA up next? Is Mr. Como? Yeah, okay. My thing's a little backwards here, but that's okay. Welcome. Once again, I'll have Mr. Como do the introduction on this one. Thank you.
My pleasure. So yes, we have CAMBA here to provide council with an update from 2022 and plans for 2023. And this is a long, I guess not super long, but certainly long enough a relationship that the town of Canmore and CAMBA have had together since mid-2017 that has been a really worthwhile relationship that has produced a lot of great things that we have CAMBA here to share those details. And to present, we have the CAMBA president. I've known Justin for a while, but I still can't get through his last name. So I'm just going to say Justin D. And he'll hopefully share with you the pronunciation, and Laura Quelch as well, also from CAMBA to present.
Welcome, Mr. B.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Graham and Council. Thanks for having us today. My name is Justin D. Oliveira. I'm the president of the Canmore Area Mountain Bike Association. Also here with me today is our executive director, Laura Quelch. And as Andreas said, we're here to sort of give an update over the last couple of years about some of our town of Canmore trail projects, and also look forward to what's coming up next. Before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to Council for really everything you do. I imagine it's a very challenging and thankless job at times. And just on behalf of CAMBA and all our members, we very much appreciate all the hard work you put into making this a great place to live and recreate. Typically I do a land acknowledgement at this point, but you've already done one. And so what I thought we would do is just shout out this cool app called Native Lands. And so this is something we tell our members about when they're going to recreate, whether it's here in the Bow Valley or elsewhere. It's somewhere you can go and learn about the indigenous history of the lands you're recreating on, which I think is something important. A little bit about CAMBA and our mandate and how it's evolved since 2016 when we were founded. We're a mountain biking association. Those are our roots, but as we've evolved, we've kind of taken a multi-user approach to trails, and this is just a reflection of the fact that our trails are very multi-user. There's very few just mountain biking trails in our area. All our trails allow for cycling, hiking, a lot of equestrian use, and so we've learned to sort of take that wider view and operate more as a trail association versus just a mountain biking association. We always like to talk about our land managers just because this is really the core of what we do. Nothing gets done on trails here without working with people that manage and own the lands, and this ranges from governments to privately owned land. And for this all started with us with the town of Canmore, who is the first land manager that we created an agreement with to build and maintain trails on their lands. And that came with some initial seed money for us of $50,000. And so, again, a thank you is in order because we don't know if or how CAMBA would have evolved without this initial relationship. And this was really, allowed us to bootstrap, and we now have relationships with sort of all the lane trail managers in our area. And a special thanks to folks in town administration, namely Andreas, who's always been very supportive and worked with us and quite frankly done a lot of educating us over the years. So thank you for your patience and support. Just a little bit about the association. Here's some numbers that we like to throw around. I think the biggest takeaway, I think, for this meeting is that, you know, in 2016, we're a purely 100% volunteer-run group, mostly by our board of directors, but we've evolved into an organization that now employs up to 12 staff. Most of that is full-time or seasonal full-time trail crew who are out there 9 to 5 working on building and maintaining trails. But we are a grassroots sort of community-based organization, and we don't want to lose that volunteer feel to what we do. So we've actually found that having a core of paid staff actually allows us to cultivate better volunteers through better experiences for our volunteers. When they show up at trail nights, they know where to go. We teach them about trail building, and so we see a lot of returning volunteers, which is great and allows us to do so much more. So that's a little bit about CAMBA, and I should say, please interrupt me at any point. I'm happy to answer questions as they come up, so just interrupt me as you need to.
Thank you.
If there's no questions about sort of CAMBA as an organization, I'll go in to talk a little bit about what we've done the last couple of years. So this is 2022 at a glance. We worked on 4 trail projects, which I will go into more detail on in the upcoming slides. We put about 600 staff hours from our paid trail crew out on trail. We ran 13 public events, so these are public build nights where anyone in the public can come out and join us and learn how to build trails. And that resulted in about 328 volunteer hours, which is our biggest volunteer turnout that we ever had. So we're pretty happy about that. And then in terms of value that we've kind of created to going to trails for this year, if you take all of our expenses and things like materials, but then also add in the staffing hours and the volunteer hours, it comes to about $43,000 sort of investment into trails in this year. So a big year. So I'll go into a little bit about our projects. So Fun Forest, which is in the Quarry Lake Park area, and this is really where it all started for CAMBA back in 2017 with that initial seed funding and agreement with the town. And so this past year, we finally connected the trail in a way that can connect from the Peaks of Grassy to Quarry Lake in a way that avoids any privately owned land. This is kind of what you can expect from this trail. A few of the highlights. It's a very fun, beginner-oriented, flowy trail. It's quite popular with beginner riders, kids, young families. We've seen an amazing response to this trail. We actually measure the usage of this trail, and we can compare it to other trails in town, and it ranks very high in terms of usage. So I think just from a usage perspective and the demographic that this trail caters to, I think it's been a resounding success and something we're very, very proud of, especially as our sort of first major project. Also in the Quarry Lake Park area is what we call a drop zone, and it's been named Droposaurus Rex. A little sidebar is we ran a fun little contest to allow the community to name these trails, and so this was open to kids and families and really anybody, and the names they came up with were Fun Forest and Droposaurus Rex for the drop zone. So what's a drop zone? This is a facility that's more targeted at mountain bikers to allow them to work on some of the more technical aspects of mountain biking, like jumps and drops. And this is in response to something that we've done over time is we survey our membership and our ridership, and we've done this back since 2016. And one of the things we ask people is sort of what is missing, what are the biggest things that are missing in terms of our trail network. And we always get a very high response of more technical trails and more technical facilities like this. And so this is kind of a response to that. Again, the drops are somewhere where we measure usage and we see high utilization. This isn't an area that gets utilized in the winter just because of the nature of it, but in the summer months, very high usage. And just to kind of place it on the map, I already showed the Fun Forest Trail connecting Peaks of Grassy to Quarry Lake. It's sort of off the trailhead, just off to the right. On the other side of town is something called the Benchlands Drop Zone. So more drops and more ways for people to work on the more technical aspects of their mountain biking skills. And so this is located right next to the dirt jumps, the Benchlands Jump Park, just kind of behind the parking lot. This is actually the orientation of this zone so close to the jump park, I think really actually creates a very unique asset for Canmore. Typically you see these facilities very isolated in other places, like you go to BC. Very rarely do you see this sort of one-stop shop with a parking lot right there. So I think this adds a lot of value to the trail network. This is kind of what you can expect in this. It's kind of like Quarry, but sort of larger scale and a little bit more variety. And so you can't really see this from the road or the parking lot, but if you go back into that treed area, you'll see that there's some trails and some wooden features back there developing. This project in particular has been one that we've seen massive volunteer turnout on. The community is very excited about this project. We've had some very big volunteer nights and people asking for more. So in that respect, it's been a huge success. The area is kind of structured into multiple zones. We opened Zone 1 this past year, and we expect to open at least 2 more zones this year. The Bow Valley Kids Trail is another project that we completed last year, started in 2021. The idea with this project was to add a short little connector trail that runs parallel to Bow Valley Trail, just beside the sort of existing town path between Kananaskis Way, just behind Solera, and the roundabout at Montaigne Road. And the idea here was to get traffic off of the commuter path by providing a fun, flowy, single-track experience. The trail's really been designed for kids coming to and from school, and so that's the idea, is kids commuting on their mountain bike to and from school, and get a little fun trail to ride along the way. So it's kind of hard to see on the map, but I've kind of just added some arrows here as to where the trail actually exists. Some photos of the trail. On the east end of it, there's a nice wooden boardwalk that kind of welcomes you into the trail. And again, this is a place where we measure usage. As a kind of a connector commuter trail, we expect usage to be high, and that's kind of what we see. And so that's promising. Did that beat mean something? Do I have to hurry up?
Hey.
Okay. Okay, I'll probably go over this. Powerhouse, this is a trail that was finished in 2001, which we're really just maintaining now. It's kind of meant to provide a black diamond connection out of the Nordic Center to address some of the kind of misuse in that area. Again, we measure usage and it's highly utilized. This is actually a project we took on to deal with one of those sort of illegal trail spurs where we had this illegal unsanctioned trail kind of dumping people with speed unsafely into someone's private driveway. And so we worked with the town and TransAlta to install some fencing to try to lead people towards the sanctioned Powerhouse Trail instead. So I'll quickly move into some financial stuff, unless there's any questions about trail projects. Okay, so this is just a breakdown of our costs so far on all of our town trail projects. So total costs up to 2021. So this is the roll up of all years up to 2021, just under $23,000. And then we also have a breakdown of our 2022 costs. Most of it is equipment and materials. And the total cost this year coming in at just over $18,000. And so the summary actually shows that from that initial $50,000, cost to date, just under $39,000 and just over $11,000 left remaining in that seed funding. One thing we wanted to mention was contributions. So these are any donated products and services, volunteer hours, things like crew hours that we pay for out of pocket. And so this is a breakdown of those, again, rolled up to 2021, and then a bit of a more detailed breakdown for 2022. And since inception, since that initial funding, that comes out to just over $63,000. So again, just to kind of summarize that, we started with $50,000 in initial funding. We've used about $39,000 of it, $11,000 remaining. Total contributions to date, just over $63,000. And then resulting, if you add those things up, in terms of what's gone into trail projects so far, $102,000. And so we're quite proud that we're able to sort of provide this return on investment, if you will, from that initial seed funding and create that amount of value going into trail projects and recreation. Any questions on the finances? Sorry. Okay.
Actually, I've got one for you while we're in there. Do you guys have any stats on the economic benefits of the work that you've done?
We don't have anything completely compiled, but we are in the process of compiling it. Last year we did some surveying at the Nordic Center and some data capture in terms of usage to basically build an economic impact study, and that should be released later this summer.
Excellent. Look forward to it, Ms. Quelch.
Yeah. Okay, and then just a quick look forward to what we're working on. And so we will continue on our active projects, which are at this point of the Benchlands drop zone. We're going to continue our ongoing maintenance from the trails at Quarry Lake Park and the other town trails. Every year we do an inspection of those trails, make sure they're safe, but also figure out what needs to be done from a maintenance perspective, and that feeds into our work plan. And then we look forward to new and exciting projects that we can take on with the town, like a new trail at Millennium Bike Park. And so the idea here is that we want to build a interpretive trail to complement the pump track that's really geared towards the youngest of our riders. We want something that is suitable for kids on run bikes and really fun, but also educational. And so we've partnered with the Rotary Club of Canmore, who have gotten some initial funding on to do some design and concept, and then the Biosphere Institute, again, to help us provide that sort of educational aspect. And so we feel there's an opportunity here to really focus in on wildlife-human use interaction education with this trail. And so, you know, what we envision is kind of this really fun, kind of, you know, inviting kids-oriented trail. This whole idea was inspired by the Beaver Lodge Kids Park in Revelstoke, but really geared towards educating kids about wildlife and other aspects of trail etiquette. Just to kind of place this area on a map, it's just off the parking lot, kind of between the parking lot and the existing pump track is where we're thinking. There's already some kind of unofficial trails back there, so we're really just kind of using that as a backbone. And again, we want to provide, you know, a lot of artwork. We're kind of playing around with different concepts, but this one of like wood burned art with different wildlife on it, and again, an interpretive aspect that teaches kids about how to interact with wildlife, you know, things like bear calling, not just for kids, for visitors as well. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. D. I see what you guys are in the queue over here. No, we're good. Any questions from council? I've got one.
Yeah.
I was hoping you might enlighten me a little bit on CAMBA's advocacy towards trail use in wildlife corridors.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham. We last year we actually worked with the Biosphere Institute to start developing messaging for specific user groups, and our group being the mountain bikers, and really educate people why wildlife corridors are important. What we find is, you know, people go to a trailhead, they see a sign that says stay on designated trails in the wildlife corridor, but it doesn't really go behind that, like why. And this concept of maximizing space for wildlife, while, you know, to people in conservation, that just seems like a no-brainer. But to recreationalists, that's not always obvious. And so we've been working on how to relay that message to our membership. We actually just gave a talk at one of the Biosphere Institute hosted Earth Talks about what can go into that. So signage and education is a part of it. The other part is actually providing a need. I think the user groups need to feel like their recreational needs are being satisfied, or else, you know, you see things like trail misuse, unsanctioned trail building, and stuff like that develop. And so, you know, providing the need, working on education, working on enforcing good behavior and discouraging bad behavior is also part of that solution. And then we believe very passionately in data capture. Whenever we make trails or put up signage, we want to measure the results so we know what's having an impact and what's not. And I think the biggest thing is that the recreational groups and the conservation groups cannot work in isolation with their own data. We need to share data. We need to share our recreational data with the people that are gathering data on wildlife, and come up with a solution. There's also the Canmore Area Trails strategy that's coming out, and you know, we're going to be very involved in that as a stakeholder as well.
Thank you very much for all the work that you guys are doing in there, and I look forward to helping encourage that
Awesome.
along. Councillor Faubert.
There we go. Thank you for your presentation. So it sounds like to me so far the relationship has been one of seed funding and partnership. If you could have a vision for the future, what's the dream scenario between the municipal government of Canmore as a land manager and CAMBA?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Faubert. I think in the way we see it kind of working is, you know, we've kind of built up a number of these assets, which we talked about. Obviously, you know, right now they're kind of CAMBA assets. I'll let Andreas kind of talk to like specifically how they're viewed by the town, but eventually those would become official town assets that would, you know, perhaps receive funding or a budget line item. And so I think long term, that's how we would see, you know, funding the maintenance on you know, all this infrastructure that we're building.
Yeah, so like an asset management, you know, like you're taking care of these assets for the town. But Andreas looks like he wants to say something.
Add that, as Mr. D has pointed out, we are coming to a point where the seed funding is going to be running out. So certainly the relationship and the arrangement between the municipality and the CAMBA organization will need to be revisited, of course, probably likely within the next year or two. So we've started some initial discussions, and whatever that change will be will certainly be, will likely include additional funding. And we'll share those details when we have those fleshed out a little bit more. But certainly we would like to continue that relationship because we've seen it really as a benefit to both parties.
That's really great to hear, because I mean, I look at some of those numbers and I don't think we can leverage the people and the passion that you guys can. And that's really a testament to what CAMBA has built over the last several years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Mara.
I was going to ask what the plan was for future management of the assets that are being built. And my other thing was just a comment to say thank you to your group and your enthusiasm and all the work that your group has put into our community.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor.
Oh, yeah. Laura's got something to add.
One thing to note, sorry, I can't see anything. One thing to note is similar, I think a dream scenario would be similar to what we've established with Alberta Environment and Parks. We have a cooperating agreement with them of $100,000 a year over 3 years for general operating. That's not what we're asking for, but I think having scenarios like that that allow us to operate and work, I think is really important as well, and building those relationships together. So.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I'd love to understand what other players are helping support your organization and how they're doing so. Any other questions from council? Anything from administration? Thank you very much, Ms. De Oliveira.
Oh, very
Pretty
good.
Close?
Yeah, we're bang on. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you very much.
We used to have Mr. D also.
Our next item up for update is the emergency response plans for extreme heat and wildlife smoke from Ms. Miller and Ms. Van Gaal. We see you two regularly. It's great to see you. Welcome to Committee of the Whole. Okay. As long as I got the same weight as the mayor, deputy mayor right now, that's all that matters.
Perfect.
Please continue.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor and Council. As mentioned, my name is Caitlin Van Gaal, Supervisor of Environment and Sustainability, and I'll be presenting today with Caitlin Miller, Manager of Protective Services and Director of Emergency Management. And we are here today to talk to you about the emergency response plans for extreme heat and wildfire smoke. So just a quick overview of what our presentation will entail. I'll just give you a brief background on the project, talk about some of the key study findings and the results. I'll then hand it over to Ms. Miller to talk about the emergency response plans in detail, as well as the recommended next steps and how we've been implementing those. And then we'll open it up for questions. So to provide a bit of context and a visualization of where this work falls within our environmental work and our emergency work, we thought we'd show you this slide, which you've seen before in a previous presentation from my team. But we are compiling and amalgamating 3 of our guiding environmental documents into one climate emergency action plan this year. That's a capital project currently underway. As well, Ms. Miller has the hazard identification risk assessment process through the Emergency Management Agency. And as you can see at the top, the Adaptation Resilience Plan from 2016, as well as the hazard identification risk assessment project that Ms. Miller takes, both identify natural hazards to the town that will be influenced by climate change. And so the top 2 natural hazards that don't currently have an emergency response plan were extreme heat and wildfire smoke, which is what brought us to this project. And the outcomes of this work will be implemented and incorporated into the Climate Emergency Action Plan as it's being developed, as well as the Municipal Emergency Management Plan, which Caitlin will speak to in more detail later. So for a bit more background, as you may remember, I came before council in the fall of 2022 with a request for a capital project to take advantage of Municipal Climate Change Action Center funding. This project was 100% funded by MCCAC, and we were able to contract All One Sky Foundation to complete this work. The work officially kicked off in January of 2023, and then began with some research into best practices and what other jurisdictions are doing regarding heat and smoke events. We then did a series of public engagement events through a public survey and an open house, as well as 4 workshops, one focused on health and well-being, one around human-wildlife interactions, one around buildings and facilities, and then the last one was an all-managers meeting, which was an internal workshop to review the emergency response plans. The final deliverable of this project was a report which you received in the agenda package today, which outlined the results of the research and best practice review, as well as the emergency response plans. So some of the key findings from the report, based on the research and the best practices, are specifically around the impacts of heat and smoke. Looking at heat first, as experienced during the 2021 heat wave, extreme heat can have very serious health consequences, including dehydration, heat stroke, and accelerated impacts from chronic disease, leading to increased hospitalization and even death. In addition to the impacts of extreme heat on public health, high temperatures can have many other localized impacts, such as increasing water temperature, increased deterioration of concrete, stress on the energy transmission and distribution systems, overloading of ventilation and cooling systems, and heat waves have been shown to impact wildlife behavior, leading to increase in human-wildlife interactions. Similar to heat, wildfire smoke can have significant health impacts and negatively affect our buildings as well. From a building perspective, wildfire smoke infiltrating through windows and doors and openings can increase load on the ventilation system, leading to a decrease in indoor air quality. And from a human health perspective, smoke can irritate the lungs, cause inflammation, and reduce immune function. And there are certain physiological and socioeconomic factors that can influence how susceptible an individual is to these outcomes and health impacts. And so this slide here lists a few of those key factors that may influence how you're impacted by smoke, some being your age, if you're pregnant, smoker, underlying health conditions, the state of your housing, as well as if you're an outdoor worker. Diving into that a bit more, through this work we had a community vulnerability assessment completed, which is an index-based risk vulnerability assessment, can be used to rank and order and identify areas.
Give them an inch, they take a mile.
So a community vulnerability assessment can help rank, order, and identify areas within a population with the highest potential for adverse public health impacts from extreme heat and wildfire smoke, as well as to identify the main contributing factors of these impacts. So this slide shows the hazard dimension, being heat and smoke, evaluated against exposure, which includes things such as population, age, workers in high-risk sectors, and against vulnerability, which looks at things such as area sensitivity to a hazard, so the density, impermeable surfaces, age of housing stock, and employment diversity, as well as the ability to cope, which looks at things such as the living alone, after-tax income, rental intensity, unemployment rate, things such as that. And this slide is the output from that community vulnerability assessment. It breaks the community out by dissemination areas from Stats Canada. I'll call them DAs. And so in each DA is ranked on the vulnerability factor from the last slide and is used to calculate a heat health and smoke health risk index score. And so on the second column on the table to the left, you'll see how each DA is ranked, with 1 being the least at risk and 18 being the highest risk. The map on the right shows the locations of these DAs, with the 3 most at-risk DAs are highlighted in red, and the 3 next most at-risk DAs are highlighted in orange. And what this shows us is that during an emergency situation, where we should be prioritizing resources and where our most vulnerable populations may be located.
Ms. Van Gogh, can you,
Go back.
I'm having a hard time with the screen today because it's a little bit, it's not as bright as normal for some reason. But can you tell me which communities are the highest?
So the highest one is 136, which you can see at the top.
And which community is that, though?
It's along Bow Valley Trail. So
Bow
it's TB Town and then Kananaskis Way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other 2?
106 is near the rec center, and then 107 is downtown, closer to the fire hall.
Okay, thank you.
That map is in the report, and it'd be easier to look at
Yeah.
in the actual report. But it's basically the age of housing in those areas and the prevalence of outdoor workers.
Right, makes sense.
So quickly looking at the climate projections for both heat and smoke to further support the need for an emergency response plan. For heat, the observed maximum daily temperatures, the daily high, in the minimum daily temperature, the daily low, over the period of 1890 to 2022 has been increasing. And what this means is that by 2050, Canmore can expect to see daily temperatures above 30 degrees at least 10 times per summer, which is up from the current average of 3 times per summer. For smoke, there is no current studies on the impact of climate change on future smoke PM 2.5 levels in Canada, but studies have linked the increase in areas burned with higher PM 2.5. And with current trends in total area burned in Canada expected to increase with climate change, as we're seeing this year, it is reasonable to expect that PM 2.5 will increase, expected that PM 2.5 levels attributed to an increase in wildfire burned areas will likewise increase. And the final thing I'll go over before handing it over to Ms. Miller is that the project also identified guidelines for emergency centers such as a clean air shelter or a cooling space. And to determine the suitability to serve as a cooling or clean air spaces, buildings must have certain features to support critical function for the hazard they are providing refuge from. So the checklist seen here, although difficult to read, is meant to be a visual representation of what our major facilities were ranked and evaluated based on. And the key takeaway from this is that each building was evaluated based on the building's systems and features, the building and site accessibility, as well as the services provided at that building. So through this checklist, it was determined that the CAMBA Recreation Center and Elevation Place at this point would serve best as a clean air or cooling space for the community. Although they're not perfect, they are our best option today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Miller to dive a bit more into the emergency response plans.
Awesome, thank you. So heat and smoke themselves do not create an emergency. It's the impact that the hazards have on people that create the emergency. So heat and smoke emergencies require a bit of a different response than what we see with other hazard types, since the immediate impact might not be noticeable. There's no incident site to manage during these events, and instead we slowly start to see the impact build throughout the community. Because of this, public messaging around personal preparedness and personal mitigation actions are central to these plans. So, how are these plans built? There's 9 key aspects that were included to ensure a successful ERP. First is the identification of a lead body to identify and engage stakeholders and to coordinate and direct the response if an emergency alert occurs. In Canmore, this is myself, the Director of Emergency Management, or the Deputy Director of Emergency Management. Next, we have the establishment of partnerships with the necessary stakeholders to successfully implement the plan and mitigate adverse health consequences. These stakeholders include internal and external agencies, including nonprofit groups, utilities, healthcare, and even our contacts in the tourism and hospitality industries. The town has many of these partnerships already well established. We need clearly delineated roles and responsibilities, including how town efforts will be coordinated with other partners and stakeholders. So administration has done that and made sure that we're clear on whose role and responsibility it is for mitigation, during an event, who puts out the messaging, who does the monitoring, etc. We need an overview of the potential health risks posed by the extreme heat and wildfire smoke event affecting the community, so that we can appropriately respond. We need the identification of at-risk populations and locations within the community to effectively respond where actions taken will have the biggest impact. We need descriptions of the alert protocol and triggers for activation, escalation, and deactivation. So there are specific triggers in each plan for when we move from the pre-event phase to a warning phase to an emergency phase, and again to start to demobilize our actions or start with we're returning to normal messaging. The identification of preparedness, response, and recovery actions and plans to mobilize individual and community action are included in the plans. A communications plan that's embedded within the ERPs to alert the community of a pending event and what actions to take so we can quickly put out messaging as required. and real-time health surveillance and post-season evaluation. So monitoring what is happening in the community is an important part of these plans, including monitoring of the weather, fire smoke, and air quality forecasts. And afterwards, it may change the trigger point for future events as determined in a post-season evaluation. So with all of our emergency plans, we highlight response priorities. The first is always to protect all lives while ensuring the safety of responders. Second is to protect critical infrastructure, then property and the environment. And in every emergency, we strive to reduce economic and social losses. The response plans detail the stages of an emergency, so the pre-plan, warning, emergency, and then post-event activities. During the pre-season, the goal is to prepare communication and make sure all plans, structures, and equipment are in order. During the warning phase, the main goal is to communicate with the public and provide education on how individuals can mitigate the effects of the heat or smoke to lessen the impact on themselves. At the emergency phase, there's the potential to activate cooling centers, reschedule events and programming, add additional services and resources such as water fountains or shaded spaces, and the like. Decisions made during the emergency and warning phases will ultimately be based on the context of the emergency, what's happening in the community at the time, so may be different than the guidelines in the plan. So for example, there may not be the need to activate an additional cooling center. We may have space at the rec center, at Elevation Place. We don't need to activate anything else. But there might be a need to reschedule or cancel an event, or add water stations depending on how the community is coping. The post-event stage is where we evaluate the response, make recommendations for improvement, and implement those recommendations. This is standard after any emergency or disaster response, as continuous improvement is a key in increasing preparedness and effectiveness of response. So we also understand that extreme heat and wildfire smokes may disrupt utilities, have a greater potential to overlap with each other or a wildfire emergency, and can increase the likelihood of human-wildlife interactions, especially near the water. The emergency response plans gives us tools to manage the extreme heat and wildfire smoke impacts during a complex or compounding emergency. We know that the adverse health impacts of exposure to high temperatures and smoke are not limited to conditions that might trigger a warning or emergency. So we will need to take preventative actions to minimize urban heat island effects, reduce the exposure and vulnerability of at-risk populations, and strengthen broader community resilience to climate change. So these are some of the examples of the long-term actions being proposed in the report, and while we won't go through them in detail during this presentation, they are being considered along with other climate resilience actions in the development of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. But as you can see here, some of the items noted are updates to civic facilities to ensure they remain spaces the community can use as cooling and clean air centers, increasing green infrastructure by providing shading around buildings and around town, for example, support air quality monitoring and advocating to the province for a permanent air quality monitoring station, and increasing equipment and infrastructure that are available for a response, and increasing transportation options. So where do we go from here, and what have we already done? Well, all grant documentation was submitted, funding was received. The completed plans have been shared publicly and incorporated into our municipal emergency management plan. Members of administration met on May 18th, 2023 to begin the pre-event activation for both the extreme heat and wildfire smoke ERPs, while also addressing the wildfire smoke situation that we were in that week. We've prepared key messaging to be housed within each ERP. We've also completed a tabletop exercise just yesterday, actually on June 19th, to familiarize ourselves with the plan for extreme heat. We'll be proposing some bylaw amendments to mitigate the impacts of these events at future council meetings. So for example, noise exemptions for air conditioners and heat pumps, so that individuals can help mitigate the impacts of these two hazards in their own homes and not require additional resources from the town. And as mentioned, long-term actions will be evaluated as part of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, and departments will begin to investigate how they relate to their business areas and budgets. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Questions from council? Councilor McCallum.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. One of the questions I had was with regards to the tabletop exercise. When we do those, do we include sort of our partners who are, I don't want to say in charge, but the conduit of communication to our most vulnerable in our community?
For this one, it was just members of administration.
Right.
But it is something that we consider when we're developing the tabletop exercise. Since it was our first time for some of us to walk through the plan ourselves, we wanted to make sure that we were familiar with it, that it made sense to us. And a lot of our partners did have input into the plan and in the workshops.
Right.
So we figured we needed the chance to actually look
Yeah,
it
of
over.
course.
Yeah.
And so is there an opportunity to do something a bit more hands-on? I guess maybe this summer, I don't know. Not that I'm hoping for smoke or extreme heat. Would there be I guess, more comprehensive tabletop exercise or
Yeah.
exercise in general?
So from the tabletop that we had yesterday, one of the takeaways was just to check in with our partners and stakeholders and to make sure that the plans were going to work and to test our assumptions and make sure that our assumptions are things that can happen. So each department that has those touch points with those different stakeholders, we're tasked to go back and just touch base with them.
Right on. Thanks, that's my question. Thanks.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham, and thank you, Ms. Miller and Ms. Van Gaal, for your presentation and all the work on this response plan. I think it's really important. We did have a speech at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities from Green Party leader Elizabeth May, which was a really good reminder of how the heat dome in BC was an avoidable disaster, and how when we talk about heat and the risk of heat, we are talking about preventable death. And so my question is around vulnerable populations, and I think that a lot of the time we think of vulnerable populations as seniors or people with mobility, access issues. But when it comes to heat, people on certain medications and people who experience addiction issues are also really vulnerable. How does this plan propose to address their special needs should there be a heat event?
Yeah, and part of it is working closely with our partners in AHS. So our colleagues in the Community Social Development Department, they have a number of contacts and they monitor different vulnerable segments of the population, and they provide us information as to what's going on, what's the impact, what's the need right now. So they work closely with AHS. They keep us informed on are people becoming more vulnerable? Do they need a safe, cool place or a safe, clean air place to go? And then we're able to address those issues then. Until there is that impact, though, we also identified tourists as being very vulnerable in our community. They might come here, they might be camping, they might not have that other place to go. So with the added visitors that we have in town, we really need to take it kind of day by day and use all the information that all the different departments are getting to assess who's vulnerable at that event at that moment.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know if visitors are on medications that make them vulnerable. And then the other issue around like being on medications or experiencing addiction is privacy. Like there's no way for us to identify these people. So in my mind, I feel like I'm excited about the work in that area, and I know it might be tough, but I think that those are the people who I really want to make sure we're taking care of if and when these heat events occur. So thank you so much.
And this is a really emergency social services heavy plan, right? Because that's what we're addressing. It's the human impact. There might not be that incident site unless it's a compounding emergency. So it's definitely a big factor, and all of our messaging and is preventative. Like as you said, it is something that we can prevent from happening. We want people to take it on and have the knowledge to mitigate the hazard for themselves as well.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. As someone who got COVID a couple times in the last few years, my lungs have been trashed. And when we had that last smoke event, I went back to wearing an N95 again. And I'm not a big fan of wearing masks, but it was, I think, you know, I'm not alone in that regard for sure. So thank you very much for the work you're doing. And any other questions? Excellent. Thank you very much, the Caitlins. Sorry. Next up, we have an update on our emergency alert system from Ms. Dinaj. Welcome to Committee of the Whole, Ms. Dinaj. Is this going to be one of your?
No.
Okay.
One of them, but not the last one.
It's not a swan song.
Good, good.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. As the Manager of Communications, I'm happy to follow on the heels of our last presentation to talk about how we might better communicate some of these events that will be coming up. So this is going to be an interactive presentation. Please pull out your phones, your tablets, your laptops with a browser open, and that goes for everybody. Oh, where'd Greg go?
I'm having a hard enough time just keeping this meeting together.
And for the very large audience in the room. All right, so in Council's current strategic plan, an objective is that emergency management communications is effective and adopted across our community. And the 2023 budget included implementation of an emergency alert notification system. And while wasn't planned this way, this week is very timely to be in front of you to launch this program. On the heels of the non-essential water ban last week, this week we're reminded of the devastating floods we had 10 years ago. In those circumstances, and of course in many others, it is essential that we are able to communicate quickly with our residents and our visitors. We currently have a lot of effective channels of communication to reach people in Canmore. Just want to be clear that we're not doing this because we're lacking in any way. We have a great website. It is our primary tool. It reaches a lot of people. And we have an effective internal email distribution list as well. There are currently almost 2,800 people subscribed to receive the Town of Canmore emergency updates by email. And if you notice in the administrative update, that number was quite a bit less. But in the last couple of weeks, with the recent water restriction ban, I think we got about 360 additional subscribers to that. We also have 2,300 followers on Twitter. We have 18,000 followers on Facebook. And of course, we use the local newspaper and radio station when appropriate. And now we have one more way to inform the public in the event of an emergency. So we are very pleased to announce the launch of the Voyant Alert notification service in Canmore. And if you haven't heard of it, Voyant Alert is a multi-purpose notification service that will be used to communicate important information to both our residents and our visitors. And I'm going to let this 2-minute video give you a very quick overview of what it does. Fingers crossed the audio still works.
You are only a few clicks away from receiving enriched and personalized communications that will not only help keep you safe, but also informed of local events and occurrences that can reduce your day-to-day stress and help you make better, more informed decisions. Your community or organization has chosen Voyant Alert because it goes beyond the simple text-based alert systems that you may be familiar with. Traditional alerts, while essential to keeping everyone safe, are often widely broadcast to entire segments of the population, even those who are far away and not necessarily impacted by the incident. Voyant Alert, on the other hand, is laser targeted, so you only receive the alerts that are relevant to you and your location. It also gives you the power to define these locations, whether it's your home, your child's school, or where you work. There is no limit to the number of locations you can add. Every day, you are bombarded by messages, spam, and notifications that can create an excessive amount of noise and frustration in your life. That's why Voyant Alert is tailored to give you the power to define the channels, devices, and type of alerts that you receive. You can choose to be notified by one, several, or all of the following communication channels: text message, email, voice call, either to your mobile phone or landline, or directly to your iOS or Android device through the easy-to-use Voyant Alert mobile app. Or, if supported by your community, through their social media channels or public portal webpage. You can opt in or out of any communication channels at any time. As we mentioned earlier, Voyant Alert goes beyond ordinary text alerts. You can expect to receive enriched information that is specifically tailored to you. You might receive pictures, documents, or, in the case of a critical incident, customized map directions to help you evacuate safely. And you will never have to be concerned about your privacy. Voyant Alert is completely anonymous, and you will never have to worry about usernames or passwords. Your data, right down to your location, is also anonymous, and your personal information will never be shared. Ready to get started? Register for free by visiting register.voyant-alert.com or download the mobile app from the Apple App Store or Google Play.
Okay, as we saw in the video, one of the main features of this service is to be able to personalize the information you receive. And most importantly, you can follow multiple locations. So Voyant allows you to create, say, where you can put in a pin, where you work, where you live, where you go to school, and any communication related to the locations that you follow will then be forwarded to whatever your preferred communication channel is. And we know that there are many people who live in Canmore and work in Banff. And it's great that other Bow Valley communities, including Banff, use this notification service, and then subscribers can select which updates to receive. And what I really like about this platform is that there's a variety of communication channels, including mobile apps, text, email, or even phone calls. So if you don't have a cell phone or email, you can sign up to get a phone call when there is an emergency. And you can register for one or all of them. And also we're going to work really hard to make sure that people don't get message fatigue. So this will only alert people when the communication's relevant to them. And at this time, we're planning to use the service for, of course, any emergency communications, fire bans, extreme heat and wildfire smoke warnings, significant road closures, wildlife advisories within the town site, and street sweeping and snow clearing alerts. And registration is free, and you see I've highlighted simple on this. So I'm going to show you how easy it is. Grab your phone or your laptop, and we're going to register you. This is going to be, if you've probably already done it while we're talking.
Keener.
You can go right to this spot here, ca.voyant-alert.com. And all of this information is also at a very easy to find URL, canmore.ca/emergency. There's also the Voyant app that you can download through the Play Store or what's the App Store, yes. But right now we're going to go here, and I'm going to show you how easy it is. All right, so if you're at this screen, if you're new, you need to click on I need to register and enter an address. So I'm going to enter the Civic Center. And I'm going to note that it's not a private residence. I'm going to change it to work. And this will bring it up that the town of Canmore services this area, so I'm going to click Next. And here's where I can very easily choose to get a text message, get an email, or a phone call. So I'm going to put in a phone number. And then we just need to click that I agree to the terms. I click next. I confirm the phone number. And that is how easy it is. Ms. Cottle, is it not working for you?
Just a question, it won't accept my home address.
Oh, it won't. It may be that, and this is probably calling me as I have my phone off, but let's go back.
If you go up into, try Eagle an address in Eagle Terrace. I couldn't get the pin to move there, and I can't get sorry, I don't want to hijack your presentation. But
That's okay.
if this is a real thing that happens in
But you
time.
could put Eagle Terrace Road, and even if you don't put in a number, you will still get notifications in that area.
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, see, wasn't that easy?
That was
Done.
easy.
Right. Except for Ms.
Sally has
Cottle.
been technically challenged all day today, if we're totally honest. It's not her first time today, so.
I'll help you with that later, Sally. Okay. All right, so what happens now that you are all registered? Some of the next steps, the video that you saw went live this morning, and of course we will be promoting this new service to the community through all of our usual channels. And encouraging people to sign up for this will be ongoing. I just want to point out this isn't a one-time campaign if you don't sign up, that we will be promoting this every opportunity we get, and this is a long-term plan to be able to continually sign people up for this service. And as I mentioned, there are currently almost 2,800 people subscribed to receive the Town of Canmore emergency updates by email. And we're hoping to transition those subscribers to the new system this summer. So all of those subscribers will get a reminder, here's our new service, please sign up for it. And of course, you can help by spreading the word. Tell people to go to canmore.ca/emergency to learn more and to sign up. And the communications team really looks forward to adding this to our list of tools that we use during an event. To be clear, it is a new additional tool, although it will eventually replace our emergency email newsletter. And lastly, we wouldn't be launching this program without the work that Caitlin Miller has done. Thank you very much to you and your team. Any questions?
Open up to council for any questions. I have one. You mentioned that this was for not only residents, but visitors as well.
Mm-hmm.
But visitors will have to sign up for this when they come, is that correct?
Yes, they will. So we'll be working with Tourism Canmore Kananaskis to make sure that in their information that they put this out. And I do believe that I would have to look into this, but Voyant Alert, if you subscribe to it in other locations, it may push out a notification that you've just arrived in a community that also subscribes to it. So there may be a way to receive it that way, but I do need to look into that and confirm it. And I think it depends on how you might have the app set up.
Okay. I know when I get emergency text messages from, say, the province or the RCP or something like that, that's focused kind of on geographic terms, and I don't have to subscribe to that. That this is different than.
Yes, the Alberta Emergency Alert System is different, and you would have had to subscribe to that, to the app to get your notifications that way. But there is also a way that I believe if it will automatically send it out to all cell phones. That is different from this, and of course, if there was a dire emergency, we would be using all of the tools at our disposal, including Alberta Emergency Alert. This is just one more tool in that toolbox.
Gotcha. Councillor McCallum.
So I just realized this is the same app that they use in the Kootenays where we camp in the summertime, and it's also, Nelson Hydro uses it for their dams, so I'll be interested to see when I go in a week, if my phone explodes and awooga like that, right? So I'll let you know.
Great. And Banff and the MD of Bighorn are currently, yes. It is very popular. It's certainly not the only solution out there, but it's the one that we chose. Anything?
Are there, are any of our neighbors using this system as well, or are we the first?
Banff,
Yeah.
the MD,
Yeah.
are
Awesome.
both using it, yes.
Thanks. Any other questions? Oh. Yeah. Ms. Dinaj, if I might, the Councillor Ma has a statement that he asked me to read in his absence today, and if you indulge me for a second. Dear fellow councillors and administration, emergency text messaging was something that I campaigned on strongly, and seeing it come to reality is a highlight for me. As a rookie elected official, I've learned a lot through this process. How to pitch an idea with fellow councillors, getting feedback from administration, and probably the biggest one for me, patience. As a business owner, I'm used to making changes almost instantly, but when it comes to running a town, things take longer. There are budget cycles to consider, funding challenges, and just the sheer work of keeping all of our prior commitments happening. There is so much more to consider. From an outside point of view, it may look like we're moving slow. But running a town takes a well-measured, thoughtful decision-making from everyone. There can be no snap decisions. This is the speed of democracy. We live in a world with more frequent weather events, emergencies, etc. And it can be scary. It's not if, but when Canmore sees its next big challenge. But how well we communicate with each other will make a massive difference in our ability to safely respond. I encourage everyone to get the Voyandat app. It's a game changer. In closing, I want to express my appreciation for my fellow councillors for supporting the initiative, for administration for bringing this idea to life, and most importantly, the citizens of Canberra who care not only for this place, but for each other. Thank you, Councillor Mall. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. Up next, Councillor Updates. Any questions for the mayor? Hold on 2 seconds while I find this page. What page is this on? Somebody help me out.
Keep going.
Administrative.
132.
That's backwards. There we go. There we go. Thank you. Any questions for... Oh. I don't have any answers for the mayor. Any questions for Councillor Faubert? Any questions for Deputy Mayor Graham? Questions for Councillor Hellstad? Councillor Ma will get a pass today. Councillor Mara. Okay. Moving on. Oh. You do. Any questions for Councillor McCallum?
Beautiful transit stats. Beautiful.
They are. That is really great to see. Okay. Well, if there's no questions for anybody, we have failed the mayor's challenge horribly, but that's okay today. I'm perfectly good with it. Next up, administrative updates. And let me just find that page now. There we go. Any questions for the CAO's office? The CAO has a question for the CAO's office.
It's not really a question. I just want to acknowledge this is Ms. Reigersberg, last meeting with council. She's only been with us for 6 months, but we have had huge agendas, massive workload. She's had perfect minutes multiple times, really made a contribution. So we'll really miss her. I just wanted to acknowledge her last meeting. We're sad to see her go. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Reiserberg. We will miss you dearly. Municipal services. We're all going to make it easy on them today, are we? Okay. Well, Councillor Faubert.
Under recreation services, I had a question around bullet B, around a fee review for recreation services operating policy. My question is around the process. Are these fees that are in the master fee schedule, or they are in a different fee schedule, and how does that work? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Fulbert. The rec fees used to be in the master fee schedule. They were taken out, and instead the rec services operating policy provides cost recovery guidance for different programs and services. So rather than having them approved, say, for 2 years, it allows us to review them on an ongoing basis, as well as price, for example, programs based on the cost to deliver and the, I would say, community benefit it provides, which is taken into account there.
This sounds like a more kind of reactive ability to adjust to inflation and the cost of supplies these days. Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. McKay, while we've got you, are we $10 for 2 hours up at Quarry Lake? Like $5 an hour?
I've personally never paid for parking at Quarry Lake, given that CAMBA residents receive 3 free hours per day. I'm not totally sure if you can purchase in 1 hour increments or not, but we can double check on that and get back to you.
Thank you. Anything else with corporate services? Nope.
I just wanted to bring to council's attention that we're trying something new with our finance update. Typically, at this time of year, we would hold a separate finance committee meeting to bring you first quarter results, which you can see from the report. We don't have a lot of information yet. First quarter is quite early in the year to be able to predict what's going to happen in the year. So Ms. Biswa tried a different approach, including the first quarter update in your administrative update in the committee of the whole report instead of a separate finance committee meeting. So just bringing that to your attention, and if you do have any feedback, please let us know. If it works for you, great. If you'd prefer a separate committee meeting to discuss those results, let us know that too moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Councillor McCallum.
Pick me. I just had a question with regards to snow and ice control budget, noting that, of course, we didn't get much snow, so our budget is looking quite lovely. What does that mean for future years in budgeting? Do we use our past years of actuals to sort of inform what our future years are? And I always wonder how that leaves us or could leave us short-footed. I'm looking at you, Mr. Go.
I can answer that. This year, we did take a bit of a different approach where we were being a bit more using values that we had used based on actuals, where in the past we wanted to put a bit more money in there to deal with some of these unknown events that were going to come and possibly put us at a variance situation. So we've taken a different approach. We hope on average that will be appropriate, but we'll learn as we go forward if that needs to change or not. In particular, the numbers, the values themselves.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's, you know, especially when you add equipment and all that stuff, although we have a contractor. My question is there an ability to treat snow and ice removal budget line items similar to how we treat development fees in terms of having a reserve set aside for those years when we might have massive snow years that we might not be ready for? Or, oh, she's ready.
Ms. Rogers.
The tax stabilization reserve would serve that purpose.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Faubert.
I have a follow-up question around snow clearing and removal. And I know we often at the end of the season hear back around the budget and how much of the budget versus actual. But do we also measure or track performance within the deliverables of the contract, i.e., you know, like trucks got to roll within a certain number, a certain inches within a certain amount of time? And I know I'm not getting this details right, but I guess like in terms of like performance review, in addition to just understanding budget, how do we measure the contractor's delivery?
Yeah, there are some performance indicators, and of course those are established in the snow removal policy. So I would say at this point the best response I can get is that we are, when we're in winter season, we are in regular contact. There's, as we approach the season, we reestablish those parameters so that everyone, you know, the contractor and the operators are crystal clear. And leading up to an anticipated high snowfall event, there's increased communication. And I would say that when the trucks roll is not so much led by the contractors themselves, but a collaboration between the town administration as well as the contractor. So we are certainly the ones pulling the trigger, I would say. And so that, I believe, ensures that we are meeting the timelines that are set out by the council and expected by the public.
Hold on. You guys got to quit coming into the queue when... Okay. Any other questions for municipal infrastructure? No. Excellent. That will get us through the administrative updates. Next is the council resolution action list. Are there any questions about the action list? Nope. Okay. Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, I was surprised we were already, I was listening. Never mind.
Okay. Next up, we have correspondence. Any questions on the correspondence that we've gotten in the last little while? I had one. I was wondering if we were going to get a presentation from Lyricon Capital, if there's anything scheduled or if that conversation's starting to take place.
So we had one in camera not all that long ago from them.
Right, I wasn't here.
Yeah, so we did
Right.
have that. And then,
That's right.
yeah, so I'm not
No,
aware
it
of anything else. I think if there's a major milestone or an update, we could invite them back. But at this stage, I don't think anything's different from the last time they were here.
Excellent. Any other questions on the correspondence? With that, I move that the meeting be adjourned. All those in favor? Anybody opposed?